We're almost up to end result time. What end result? What end result? Everyone thinks they know the end result. When did you find this out? Yesterday? 10 years ago was yesterday. Yesterday was 10 years ago. One trick ponies. Go away. And there, I want an ice cream. Finer things in life. Rather hot here today. I'm not meant to go out with these burns, but someone's got to go out and do it. Walked out in the sun and blistered instantly. Whoop. Give it up. Rip it off. Put a bit of aloe vera on it. Alright. Num. So we're going to have a little bit of a read. Watch a couple of little videos. And I'm going to show you a couple of maps. Oh yeah. So you can see how all this relates to get the big picture of the end result. I'm not going to go jumping down rabbit holes. And so you know I'm not. Right. We're going to talk about the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine. Say that. Right, where are we? No. Wikipedia. Okay. We're talking about old worlds and new worlds and stuff. Yeah. Not the New World Order conspiracy theory stuff. We're talking about the New World Order conspiracy without the theory. The Monroe Doctrine is a United States foreign policy position that opposes European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere, which since World War II has been extended to oppose any foreign interference in Western Hemisphere. It holds that any intervention in the political affairs of the Americas by foreign powers is a potentially hostile act against the United States. The doctrine was central to American grand strategy in the 20th century. President James Monroe, where have we heard the name Monroe before getting involved in the politics? That'd be the first documented honeypot that got involved with the Kennedys, hey? Maybe is this why the JFK files haven't been released yet? Okay, we'll put that up there. We won't come back to that today, but we're definitely putting it up there. Boink! Alright. President James Monroe first articulated the doctrine on December the 2nd, 1823. Well, that was a long time before Maralyn. Bloodlines are bloodlines, bro. Bloodlines be bloodlining. During this 7th annual State of the Union address to Congress, though it was not named after him until 1850, at the time, nearly all Spanish colonies in the Americas had either achieved or were close to independence. Monroe asserted that the New World and the Old World were to remain distinctly separate spheres of influence. Excuse me. See, this Old World and the Old Guard and New World Order stuff, it's nothing new under the sun. It's happened plenty of times. or towards the goal of a last world agenda. It's starting to sound a bit spooky, isn't it? And thus, further efforts by European powers to control or influence sovereign states in the region would be viewed as a threat to US security. In turn, the United States would recognise and not interfere with existing European colonies nor meddle in the internal affairs of European countries. Because the US lacked both a credible navy and army at the time of the Doctrine's proclamation, it was largely disregarded by the colonial powers, while it was successfully enforced in part by the United Kingdom, who used it as an opportunity to enforce its own Pax Britannica policy. The doctrine was ignored several times over the course of the 19th century, notably by the Second French intervention in Mexico. By the beginning of the 20th century, the United States itself was able to successfully enforce the doctrine, and it became seen as a defining moment in the foreign policy of the United States and one of the longest-standing tenets. It has been invoked by many US statesmen and several US presidents, including Ulysses S. Grant, Theodore Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, I mentioned him, didn't I? Ronald Reagan, Reaganomics sucks, another actor, JFK, Maralyn Monroe, Ronald Reagan, all connected to Hollywood, forming a pattern there, aren't we? And he's being substantively reinterpreted in the 2020s by Donald Trump. When was this done? It has no date. Anyway, let's move on. After 1898, the Monroe Doctrine was reinterpreted by lawyers and intellectuals as prompting multilateralism and non-intervention in 1933 under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The United States reaffirmed this new interpretation through co-funding the Organization of American States into the 21st century. The doctrine continues to be variably denounced, reinstated or reinterpreted. In this video we're going to get into why, as far as I'm concerned, the United States can piss off out of it. We don't want them I'm going to explain to you how Ricardo Bosi and co are controlled opposition, part of the same world agenda, and they're not going to like this. I'll be surprised if this stays up, this video. According to Samuel Eliot Morison, as early as 1783, then the United States adopted the policy of isolation and announced its intention to keep out of Europe. The supplementary principles of the Monroe Doctrine that Europe must keep out of America was still over the horizon. By the end of this video, you're going to realise it's got nothing to do with narco-terrorism and just more about straight up political terrorism, government terrorism of people. Despite the United States, despite the United States beginnings as an isolationist country, the foundation of the Monroe Doctrine was already being laid almost immediately after the end of the American Revolution. Alexander Hamilton, writing in the Federalist Papers, was already wanting to establish the United States as a world power and hoped that it would suddenly become strong enough to keep the European powers outside of the Americas, despite the fact that the European countries controlled much more of the Americas than the US herself. Hamilton expected that the United States would become the dominant power in the New World and would, in the future, act as an intermediary between the European powers and any new countries blossoming near the United States. A note from James Madison, Thomas Jefferson's Secretary of State and the future President. The US ambassador to Spain expressed the US government's opposition to further territorial acquisition by European powers. Madison's sentiment might have been meaningless because, as was noted before, the European powers held much more territory in comparison to the territory held by the US, although Jefferson was pro-French in an attempt to keep the US out of any European conflicts. The federal government under Jefferson made it clear to its ambassadors that the US would not support any future colonisation efforts in the North American continent. We'll have a little pause for a second. Now, if you want to go back, and we must, let's go back a little bit further. We're going to go back all the way to the fall of Rome. I say all roads lead to Rome, but all roads from Rome after the fall of Rome led to Britain, Great Britain, England, cobblestone roads. The Romans took over the Anglo-Bavarian colonies of Europe. Many of them, which is why we'll see the same fashioned eagle minimise some of these. Okay, I've got a bit going on my screen because we've got a bit to learn in this. Right, the Roman Aquila gilded eagle. Standard was the legion's sacred soul. Its loss meant ruin, its gleam inspired conquest. A 2,000-year-old icon. Right, you look on the eagles. Okay, we'll have a look at one, will we? Yeah, I'll give you a look at this one here. I've got one here on the screen. It's an icon of imperial power. So yes, the whole imperialism thing is a thing. That's a bit damaged, that one. You've got a couple of holes in him. But then, just so we know that we know, you know. Then we have the Scottish Rite Eagle of Freemasonry. It's an Aquila eagle again. Holding what? The Rosarian cross. Not sure what that is. From here, hard to say. But that's the Rosicrucian cross of who? Say with me now, the Knights Templar. We're going back that far. We have to understand it. It all relates to Freemasonry. If you think Freemasonry is a small thing, that is the United Nations meet one of their halls, just one hall. That's crazy, I know. That's a Freemasonry knighting. We're past 33rd degree here, folks. We're talking about Grand Masters and Grand Masons. Way up in the 40 area. You can bet your bottom dollar okay, I'm going to let you put a little bit of tinfoil hat on for a second. Jeffrey Epstein's not dead. He's hanging out with those guys. What, you don't think that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't Donald Trump's handler? How do you think these things last for so long? Centuries, generations. It's a plan that just goes on and on and on. As civilization moves on and generations move on and technologies change, that's how they're able to go on with the next stages of the plans. They have to wait for technology to catch up with the plan. So, like I say, there's nothing new under the sun. God bless you, Teppy. Right. Doesn't mean I don't believe in God either. Of course I do. The US feared the victorious European powers that emerged from the Congress of Vienna would revive monarchical government. So what's the monarch other than a symbol of the past now? Tim Dwyer, there's nothing you can do constitutionally. As much as we would like it, controlled opposition would even like you to think so. I think Tim Dwyer knows. Wayne Glue, almost feel sorry for the man. I think he's caught in a past that no longer exists. He's trying to bring something into the future that just can't be done. As much as the 1900 Constitution is the only lawful constitution in this land, we're never going to be able to use it unless we enact it. We can't ask the government to enact it. You can threaten them all you like with Westminster, with the House of Lords, with the British Governor General. As we've clearly seen, because of the Monroe Doctrine, the monarch has no real authority anymore. France had already agreed to restore the Spanish monarchy in exchange for Cuba. As the Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815, Battle of Waterloo, came to an end, Prussia, Austria and Russia formed the Holy Alliance to defend monarchism. In particular, the Holy Alliance authorised military incursions to re-establish Bourbon rule over Spain and its colonies, which were establishing their independence. Now, I'll finish this paragraph. British foreign policy was compatible with the general objective of the Monroe Doctrine. Britain went as far as covertly assisting the South Americans in their fight against Spain. Britain offered to declare a joint statement concerning the doctrine, as they feared trade with the Americas would be damaged if other European powers further colonised it. In fact, for many years after the doctrine took effect, Britain, through the Royal Navy, was the sole nation enforcing it, as the United States Navy was a comparatively small force. The US government did not issue a joint statement due to the recent war of 1812. However, the immediate provocation was the Russian ukase of 1821, asserting rights to the Pacific Northwest and forbidding non-Russian ships from approaching the coast. Are we starting to see what a picture forming now with the Black Sea and Ukraine? Russia wants their sickle back. I don't think I need to read any more of this. Internal response. Oh, hang on. Because the United States lacked both a credible navy and army at the time, the doctrine was largely disregarded internationally. Prince Clemens von Metternich of Austria, part of the Germanic nations, was angered by the statement and wrote privately that the doctrine was a new act of revolt by the US that would grant new strength to the apostles of sedition and reanimate the courage of every conspirator. Conspirator, hey? So they had conspiracies way back when. These aren't theories, people. 1896. I'll give you a look at the picture. Because it's quite telling of what's going on here. Remember how these people got here in the first place was from here? What is that? That, my friends, is the Panama Canal. That's what that represents in that picture. The doctrine, however, met with tacit approval from Britain. Yeah, I'll look that word up after. I like that one. Tacit or tacit, T-A-C-I-T, from Britain, which enforced it tactically as part of the wider Pax Britannica. Heard of Encyclopedia Britannica? They had an entirely different map in it up until 1956 that showed the ice wall that Captain Larry Bird found. Yeah. This is why I don't run down round in rabbit holes. Why? Because they abstract and mess up and muddy up the waters of truth. This is why I'm coming at it from this angle. From all of what can be proven that you can go and just Google and find yourself of credible, actual factual information. What you can go down the library and find in books. In any library. Back to the start of that paragraph. The doctrine, however, met with tacit approval from Britain, which enforced it tactically as part of the wider Pax Britannica, which included enforcing the freedom of the seas. This was in line with the developing British policy of supporting laissez-faire free trading. Laissez-faire. Laissez-faire, I'm guessing, well, of course that's French. Laissez-F-A-I-R-E, free trading, and opposing mercantilism. Britain's fast-growing industries sought markets for their manufactured goods, and if the newly independent Latin American states became Spanish colonies again, British access to these markets would be cut off by Spanish mercantilist policies. You see how we're not people in their eyes? We're just commodities. We're just objects for economics. We are the driving battery for economics. That's what you will find the Matrix was trying to explain to you. We are the battery for economics. Right. Got the lion by the tail. let's watch a little video. Just give me a break from reading for a sec. It gives you a break from listening to me read. I know, at least I don't have a monotone voice. Yeah. Right, where are we? Yeah, can we all see that alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Mongers and puckwops? Okay. Go to there. We'll go to the simple one and then the not so simple one.
Hey guys, welcome to Today's History. We got it going on for you today. Monroe Doctrine, a really simple explanation for all of you kiddies out there and adults who are taking tests and you need to know maybe an easy way to remember or to get the concept. The Monroe Doctrine was a doctrine issued by James Monroe in 1823, and I call it dog piss in the hood. And it's a really simple way to understand the idea. Of course, dog urination generally refers to the idea of warning somebody, and hood, of course, is kind of your neighborhood. So the concept here is that America is kind of outgrowing its Washington isolationism. We're not quite ready to go into the world and start pounding our fist on people's faces, but we certainly are at the point where we can turn to Europe and expand the isolationist doctrine with kind of a warning to Europe as well. So Latin America is the hood, dog piss is the warning, and the concept is an extension of isolationism. So it's half Washington, Europe, we will stay the hell away from you, war gods of evil. But, Europe, you need to stay away from our hood. So the Monroe Doctrine, although, like I've said previously, is not filled with enforcement, it is the beginning of the roots, really, of what will become imperialism. When we get to Roosevelt Corollary, guys, we're going to put some teeth in that dog. We're going to grab a baseball bat or a Navy, and we're going to start kind of whacking heads. We're going to build the Panama Canal and do the Spanish-American War and grab, Hawaii and go out to the world and start to do things. But Monroe Doctrine, dog piss in the hood, 1823, James Monroe, Latin America, Europe, stay the hell away, and I'm done with you right now. You should go learn more things.
All right, he puts it in a way it's easy to understand. Alright.
Hello, you're watching Deep Dive with me, Uday Pratap Singh. While the global attention today remains on United States' invasion of Venezuela and the arrest of Maduro, did you know that it was once the same United States which protected Latin America against colonizing activities? Donald Trump, while announcing the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, spoke of the 200-year-old Monroe Doctrine. Here's what he said.
Right. Potentially in league with the cartels operating along our border. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries, and not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines, and the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal.
So what is the Monroe Doctrine? This is the 203-year-old paper laid out by the then United States President in 1823. James Monroe was the 5th President of the United States between 1817 and 1825. This was a time when the United States wasn't a global superpower and had the constant threat of dealing with European powers in the Americas. Before understanding why the doctrine was articulated, let's understand what it contains, based on a speech given by Monroe in 1823.
This brilliant device keeps your home cool in summer, even during heat waves and power outages. It's smaller than a lunchbox.
US would not enter European conflicts. Existing European colonies in the Americas would remain untouched. No new European colonization would be allowed. Attempt to control countries in the Western Hemisphere would be treated as a hostile act against the US. Well, this is the map of the Western Hemisphere in the ancient world. It contained both Latin America and North America countries. In the 1820s, 10 Latin American countries gained independence from European colonial powers. Mexico declared independence from Spain. Brazil got independence from Portugal in 1822. Gran Colombia, Peru and Bolivia gained independence from Spain. and the United Provinces of Central America, which split into present-day Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. The Monroe Doctrine was the United States' clear message to Europe of no further expansionist activities in the Americas. In return, the US said it would not interfere in European affairs. The idea was straightforward. Europe would stay out of the Americas, and the Americas would remain free from European control. The Monroe Doctrine was presented as a policy of non-interference and respect for sovereignty. The doctrine was shaped largely by Monroe's Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, who later became president himself. Its purpose was to protect newly independent nations in Latin America, safeguard US strategic interests, and prevent rival powers, including Russia, from expanding their influence in the region. Over the years, the Monroe Doctrine became a cornerstone of US foreign policy in the Western Hemisphere. In 1865, American diplomats used it to support Mexico's President Benito Juarez in his struggle against French Emperor Maximilian. At that stage, the doctrine was still defensive in nature, aimed mainly at blocking European influence. However, the meaning of the Monroe Doctrine began to change in the early 20th century. President Theodore Roosevelt expanded it to justify US military intervention across Latin America. This expansion, known as the Roosevelt Corollary, allowed Washington to step in when it believed instability in neighboring countries threatened US interests. From that point on, the doctrine was no longer only about keeping Europe out of the Americas, it increasingly became a justification for American intervention within the region. During the Cold War, the Monroe Doctrine was frequently used to counter Soviet influence in Latin America. The United States supported friendly governments, backed coups, and intervened directly or indirectly in several countries. Critics argue that the use of the doctrine often destabilized left-wing governments that were not aligned with US interests, sometimes at the cost of democracy and regional stability. That brings us to the present. Now not only has the interpretation changed, but Trump has renamed the doctrine as Donroe Doctrine, calling it the original one an outdated document. Unlike the original Monroe Doctrine, which focused on preventing external interference in the Americas, the Donroe Doctrine signals a willingness to take direct military action against governments the United States considers dangerous. It represents a shift from deterrence to enforcement and from influence to intervention. What began in 1823 as a warning to empires has now in 2026 became a justification.
I'm just going to out and blatantly say it. It's about communism.
For action. Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is live with us on the broadcast. Madhav Nalapat, does the Monroe Doctrine have no relevance anymore in 2026 for the United States of America?
Well, Uday, it should not, for a simple reason that all of us thought that the age of colonialism was long over, but I think Trump would have been very happy if 200 years ago. The Monroe Doctrine is more than 200 years old, and the reality is it gives the United States of America the right to take control of whatever assets there are in South America. Now that is the Monroe Doctrine, and now that is called by Trump the Donroe Doctrine, and he says it's even more strengthened and expanded. Well, I mean, you know, kidnapping presidents and bringing them to trial and whatever may be a refinement of the Monroe Doctrine. But I can tell you that the age of colonialism is now back, and back literally with a bang from the skies.
What he's done is he's turned it from a duck and a weave and a block to a left hook and a right cross. We'll just take it. We're not just going to protect you, we're going to take what you got. Modern day mafioso protection racket. Yeah, well, if you don't want to be protected, then we'll take it.
United States jets and United States other helicopters attacking air bases and other facilities in Venezuela. The reality is what Monroe wanted and what Trump wants is the resources of Latin America. So it's very clear his objective is not to stop at Venezuela, but to go further and further. The whole of Latin America will be covered, just as was covered by the Monroe Doctrine. So I personally feel it's a wake-up call for the entire South American continent, and it's a wake-up call for external powers to see if they will stand by while this kind of colonial subjugation takes place again. I would say very honestly that what we are seeing here is Trump's assertion of the right of the United States to have the plunder and loot the riches of South America.
Yes.
And in Venezuela, that means oil and rare earths.
Is this then going to be a precedence, for this reinterpretation of the doctrine with regards to other countries as well seen as potentially quote-unquote inimical?
Look, any country apart from the United States is deemed by the Donroe doctrine to be committing a hostile act and subject therefore to kinetic action. Any country, Trump has reserved that space entirely to the United States of America, led by him, and to no other country. So very frankly, Uday, it's a very scary thought for many people in many countries who thought they had shed the colonial yoke, and now they find it coming back in a renamed fashion in South America. So quite honestly, I want to ask, what happens if other major powers assert themselves the same way? What if China says that according to the Shiro doctrine, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, all these countries have got to be subjugated to China and basically do what China wants them to do? It would be an untenable situation. It would be a clear breach of any kind of international law and a return to a law of the jungle. So quite frankly, Uday, the stakes are immense, and what is happening in Venezuela will play out over the next several weeks, if not months, before a climax is reached. And by that climax, either
Yes.
it becomes clear that Trump has been pushed back from this ambitious goal,
Okay.
or succeeded, and that's quite a major situation to happen. Thank you.
All right, Professor Nalapath, appreciate you joining us with your perspective on this segment.
So basically, how can I put this in a way that remember, like, let's not forget where Donald Trump comes from, New York, a mafia-based built city, with the concrete boots and where Sal was, New York. What did they used to have a lot of? A protection racket. You had everyone that had businesses and shops and so forth had a protection racket going on, where the mafia, Al Capone's boys, Joe Bananas, Salvador and all those guys, the real Sopranos, you paid for protection. From who? Well, who the people in the shop originally thought was somebody else. And we'll go in and rock the boys off a bit, and, then it proves that the police can't do anything about it because, we grease their pockets. And then we go in and we offer them protection. Who from? From us, dummy. Oh, good one, boss. International protection racket. Racketeering, they call it. He's found the way to turn the Monroe doctrine into let's call it lawfare. Not law, but lawfare. We'll call it legal fare. Legislature. Legislated crime. Not legislated criminal activity. A legislated racketeering racket. Racketeering racket. That's like a automatic teller machine, isn't it? An ATM machine. Okay. Now. Oh bang, where is it? Where did I put that? I've lost something. Where did I put it? Is it down here? There we go. Okay. Yeah, I know. Big dollar stuff going on here, boys and girls. So what are we looking at here? We'll make this squid really big. That's kind of not working for me. Well, that will. Right. What are we looking at here? Well, we've heard of the New World Order, haven't we? How it changes the actual globe. This is what they're in the middle of building. You're starting to see the picture here now. Okay? Hegemony and leverage. It's got all of that surrounded, right? Europe's pretty well sorted. They're getting Europe pretty well sorted. The Asian, Europe, Asia, Russia. So let's not kid ourselves that Russia's on a different side. That's what they're looking to build. Russia's doing their job quite well in a proxy war where both opponents are actually on the same side. You know, remember what I was talking about? The protection racket? For what? Well, we end up with the global north and the global south. Then it's just the north versus the south. Oh, the north and the south again. Yeah, the north and the south again. Civil war of the world, not just a nation. For what? United Nations. That's the picture on the United Nations flag. The New World Order. The final world order. Last days. Until you're prepared to look at the big picture, have the hard conversations on how we're having our religions, our faith bastardised and turned into multiple religions, forgetting about the lessons of our Creator, Yahuwah Elohim, the Most High. Yeah, I know, they reckon there's something wrong with me because I like black cats. I love the aniseed. Good for your blood. Yeah. That's the New World Order. The conspiracy theory. From Rome to now. From the Roman Empire to the Donroe imperialist doctrine. Been a long time coming, hasn't it? Well, it takes a long time. This hasn't got anything to see. This is where we're stupid. We think everything has to happen in our lifetime, otherwise it's not really happening. Don't kid yourself. Bloodlines be bloodlining. Right? Like the Rothschilds. Where do you think the name Rothschild actually comes from? It comes from the way back machine. I'm talking way back to the blood sacrifice days of early Egypt. Ra's child. The child of Ra. Nephilim, a demigod. And what do we celebrate at Christmas? Not Christ. The rebirth of the sun. Ra's child. So what was 9/11 all about? spitting on Christ's grave. Look up the Julianic and Gregorian calendar. Julianic calendar is Julius Caesar's calendar. Pope Gregory the 13th modified the calendar. Bada boom, bada bing. And now we have the Gregorian calendar. Pope Gregory, Pope, Vatican. Vatican is where? Rome. Who nailed Christ to the pole? The Romans. There is your relevant actual history of what's been the plan in the making. They tried to stop it by killing the firstborn son of everyone in the Arabian and Middle Eastern nations. Everyone. That's where national census came from. You know the census forms that you fill out? It's about working out who's who and what's what. Who's who and is who, what in the parking lot, where all the bloodlines are. That's what that's all about. That's what your registration of birth is all about. That's why some of our families just seem to be picked on for some strange reason. Some families just seem to cough it real hard for no real reason. There's a reason, all right. So now you can go back to your so-called freedom fighters like Ricardo Bosi after watching this and watching it again and again, and then go and doing some actual fact-checking, not rabbit hole diving, on what you've seen for yourself. Accessible to everybody, you just got to connect the dots. You've got to see the pattern. If you don't see the pattern, it's not there. If you don't see the pattern, it's a rabbit hole. You can go back and tell them, now that you have proof, evidential, solid proof, that they're all working for the New World Order, the World Economic Forum, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, to turn us into a united nation of one planet. A united planet of one nation. Hello, Pauline. One nation.